Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Greek Current Cafe, and I hope you all had a great Christmas for everybody who was celebrating. While 2025 is around the corner and one eye is on what the new year will bring, we've still got one eye on 2024 as we bring you the second part of our two-part series on the losers and winners of the year. In case you missed it, make sure to tune into part one, where we break down the biggest losers. With that in mind, here's part two and a look at this year's biggest winners, from the personalities making waves in business and politics to the year's standout countries. Back on with us for part two are, once again, Lena Argiri, the DC correspondent for ERT and the Greek Public Broadcasting Company in Kathimerini. Lena, great to have you back on.
Hello, guys.
Dimitri Eliopoulos, the CEO of Curi RMB Capital and a longtime member of HALC. Dimitri, great to see you.
Good morning.
It looks like you got the dress code memo as well, so good to see we're all on the same page.
Yes.
And as always, the irreverent Endy Zemenides. Endy, great to have you here.
And for the winners of the year, just in honor of the ultimate winner of all time, I have The Last Dance playing back then. I think Jordan was a winner this year too. Didn't he sell his share in the Charlotte team for, like, I don't know. You were there, Dimitri, in North Carolina. Did he sell it for billions? You made billions profit?
Around $3 billion.
Jesus. All right.
Some light change, some pocket.
Guy never stops winning. Never stops winning. Take that, LeBron fans.
And for those asking, I've got King Otto in the background. We've got the 20-year anniversary of Greece's 2004 Euro win in 2024. So for anybody who hasn't checked it out, it's free on Amazon Prime with a subscription there. But with that in mind, as we kick off every episode, let's jump in with Shot Clock, where you'll each have 24 seconds, just like in the NBA and the Ode to the Last Dance there, to give us your three top winners of the year. But as a warning to you all, we're taking Trump off of the board since he's the clear winner. But you can give us a subcategory there, so let's get creative with it. Lena, hit us with your top four. The shot clock is on.
Top four or top three?
Top three.
Three. So I'll start.
We got 2004 in mind with the Euro behind me.
It's okay. So Elon Musk, since I cannot pick Trump himself, and then there's Israel, a winner beyond comparison, a winner in a league of its own, actually, and finally India, a country you might not expect me to pick, but I can explain why later. These three.
All right, Dimitri, you've got 24 seconds.
Sure. I will start with the U.S. economy, artificial intelligence, and keeping the spirit of a reference to basketball, women's basketball in the United States and the impact that's having, not only on inequality and influence, but also the economy.
All right. Endy, the floor is yours.
Subcategory for Trump. Florida Republicans. And I'm betraying my colors, and my shirt betray this, but I take Greek sports in general, but specifically Vangelis Marinakis, and thanks to Lena's reporting, Cyprus.
All right. Well, I think keeping in the spirit of, this big election and having taken Trump off the board with the Trump subcategory, let's dive in with Elon. Lena, most people would have pointed to Trump as a big winner, as we have, but Elon Musk seems to be his sidekick here. Aside from his company's successes, is it really the politics that make him the big winner in 2024?
Absolutely. It's mainly the politics, I would say. Elon Musk is, without any doubt, Thanos, the most influential person in Trump's orbit, a real power in his inner circle, and that alone makes him a big winner. So he has proven that he's one of the smartest guys around. No matter if one likes him or not, we all have to admit that he's usually one step ahead, both in the way he thinks and in the way he plans. So the fascinating thing is that he has mastered a truly unique paradox, being the world's richest person while positioning himself as an outsider fighting against the establishment. The irony, of course, is that he has now become the establishment. He has now become part of the system, if not the system itself. But, he thinks on a scale that most people can't even begin to grasp. So, yes, Musk is here to stay, and we better get used to that idea, Thanos.
You really think he's here to stay, or do you think Donald Trump may get sick of him?
So, I mean, nobody can say right now for how long these two powerful personalities can peacefully coexist, right? The time will tell. But for now, Musk and this is unmatched in his influence. And if he's not the real winner right now, then who is, right? I can't think of anyone else.
Florida
Yeah.
is the real winner. Think about it. They got. I don't think we've seen a state have. This is like, since some people from Heritage are talking about the American Revolution. This is like how Virginia was in the late 1700s. You have the president who's really a New Yorker, but decided to switch domicile to Florida. The Secretary of State, so this is like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson both being from Virginia, is going to be from Florida. The National Security Advisor is from Florida. The Chief of Staff is from Florida. They came close to having the Senate Majority Leader, Rick Scott, who will be disproportionately powerful in the Senate, is from Florida. If Hegseth goes down, there's rumors that DeSantis, so another Floridian in the cabinet, and so Florida Republicans may be a bigger winner.
Well, Endy, it seemed, in the Obama years, it seemed like Chicago was the hub for Democrats.
But there weren't that many. Yeah, but it wasn't that. The Secretary of State was not from Chicago. I mean, if you looked at the top people, you had maybe two Chicagoans in the cabinet, Penny Pritzker and Arnie Duncan. They were not insignificant, but not to this, definitely not to this level.
Yes, and all these appointments really show just how politically important Florida has become, and that wasn't the case before, as you said. I think it's clear that the state is transforming into a political powerhouse with real influence on the national level, and this is something that we should watch closely moving forward. So that was the correct big idea.
I mean, it went from the ultimate swing state.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about it. 2000, it was a swing state. It came down to the hanging chads. Florida came down to a Supreme Court case. In 2008, it was the big swing state that swung towards Obama and turned into what was really a landslide. If people talking about landslide elections, look at the difference between 2008 and 2024, and you'll see what landslide means. 2016, 2012, 2016. But Florida, it seems to have gone from a swing state to maybe even supplanting Texas in the hierarchy of most important big Republican states.
We've been talking about politics, and obviously it is massively important, but the U.S. economy is what I want to turn to next. And, Dimitri, that was your top pick here. Give us the overview. I mean, you're dealing with financials, you're looking at the economy closely all the time. What are you seeing? What are the key trends that you think we need to be aware of here for 2024?
Sure. Well, it is all interrelated, economics and politics. I mean, that's what most individuals in this country throughout the world are thinking about on a day-to-day basis. And I'll start with the fact that for really the third consecutive year, the economy in the United States has shown its resiliency. There have been forecasts and expectations for an economic recession now for 2 or 3 years. And once again, here in 2024, the US avoided that. I actually give a lot of credit to our central bank, the Federal Reserve. I give a lot of credit to central banks all over the world, frankly. If we take a step back for just a second, there was a huge experiment that happened in this country and throughout the world coming off of the great financial crisis. And that experiment was quantitative easing, where central banks brought interest rates basically to zero. In some countries around the world, interest rates were negative. Here in the United States, the government was buying back its own debt and its own mortgage debt. And it probably worked. It probably helped us get out of a really deep recession, one that we hadn't seen since the Depression. And then the question started to get asked, how do we get out of this? And would the Fed be able to raise rates back to normal and not cause a crash landing or a recession? So at the beginning of 2022, the Fed started to raise interest rates. It basically raised rates from 0 all the way to 5.5%. And now here in 2024, they brought it down to about 4.3%. Unemployment has remained low. The housing market has not collapsed. The stock market set 50 new all-time highs here in the United States this year. It's up over 55% over the last 2 years. So I think the U.S. economy is a clear winner. And I do think that it does have some momentum.
Hey D, you avoided one thing though, a kind of a sub-winner in this.
Sure.
I agree with everything you said, but inflation has persisted, even to the extent that now the Fed is saying we're not going to cut as much as you think. Inflation is high, and frankly, for anybody, especially living in big cities and knowing what the housing market is like, and go to the grocery store now, and frankly, inflation maybe it's such a winner that it decided this election. How do we treat inflation? And
yes.
How should this affect the Florida Republicans that are about to take over?
Inflation is clearly a winner. It's been frustratingly high. Now it's come down, factually, it's come down from, that peak of 9 or 10% a couple of years ago back closer to about 2.5 or 3%. But day to day, depending on, where a family is, spending its income, it is stubbornly high. It also is normalized. Inflation being as low as it was for the last 10 or 15 years, maybe it was not realistic. A couple of things, Endy, to answer your question and your perspective. First, when you anticipate higher inflation for longer, you want to think about, at least from an investment perspective, what are those type of assets that keep up with or beat inflation? Real estate is one of them. Commodities is another. Even equities, where a company can pass down its increased prices to consumers, to the bottom line. The other thing that I'm going to keep a very close eye on, and this could be, this kind of ties into what Lena was talking about before, where it seems right now the momentum that the Trump administration has going into 2025 is high. And with that, expectations are high. One of the people that he has selected as his U.S. Treasury Secretary is Scott Bessent. And one of the things that he has said recently is this is probably our very last chance to grow our way out of the deficit and actually defeat inflation once and for all. He's proposing this 3-3-3 target, 3% GDP growth, a reduction.
It sounds like an infomercial, right?
Right, it does, but it's also simple.
What was it? Who was it? Was it who was the pizza guy?
999.
999.
Yeah, I forget that guy's name. But he's proposing 3% GDP growth, a target of 3%, a 3% reduction in our deficit by the year 2028, and increasing our oil supply by 3 million barrels a day, which would be a 20% increase. I think all those.
Dimitri, where do you see to bring you to number 2 here for your picks? Where do you see AI factoring here? We're seeing these magnificent 7 stocks that are all about tech, all about artificial intelligence. Elon Musk is on that bandwagon too, to tie it into the first pick from Lena. How does this tie in together?
It is AI. I think is going to be extremely revolutionary beyond what you just referenced a second ago about. I think people think about AI and they say, oh, these big mega 7 tech stocks like Tesla as an example, but it's beyond that. This year, there was a lot of hype around AI. I think one of the clear winners was NVIDIA. But AI is not a new concept. It's something that has been built out now for 1 or 2 decades. It has just really gained the attention of the general public over the last couple of years. And I think what we're going to start to see going into 2025 is this transition from generative AI to what's called agentic AI. Using practical usage of AI in our day-to-day lives. It's going to be beyond technology. We're going to see it in things like our utilities, our ability to use AI to track our usage of energy day to day. You're going to see it in my industry, in financial services, where they're forecasting that daily administrative tasks, the time to complete those, could be reduced by as much as 60%. You're going to see it in infrastructure. You're going to see it in the construction of data centers and the management of the energy supply. You're going to see it in agriculture. So AI is going to be widely used. And I think for the future winners, it's those companies, it's those industries, it's those individuals that learn how to use AI to make their service and their product better. And Thano, maybe where you were leading me with that is, if it's properly used, it actually could be deflationary. It could actually reduce the cost of our services and our goods.
So that's one to look out for. With that, I want to pivot more to the geopolitical side of things. And Lena, get back to you here. Let's look at Israel, your second pick. The attack by Hamas on October 7th last year could have really been a breaking point for the country. Has it emerged stronger than ever?
I mean, it could have been a breaking point, but
it was in 2023, by the way, Thanos.
Yeah, you're right.
You're losing your dates.
Well, over the last year and a half, the October 7th, the war's been ongoing.
So it strengthened and transformed the country completely. And so Israel is a winner in a completely different league, of course. But this year it reminded the region and the whole world, actually, who the real boss is. And, it's not just its impressive military strength, which we have been witnessing for months now, that makes it a winner. I would say that it's Israel's strong determination to act in its own interests and only in its own interests. This approach and this attitude has solidified its dominance in the Middle East and elevated the country to a power of global proportions. And this is impressive. And what I find even more impressive is how it's redefining the rules as we once knew them, because it doesn't wait, for approval from other major powers, nor does it concern itself much with the world's opinion when they clash with its goals. Even when it seems like the whole world is against it, Israel will proceed with its plan and will ignore everything else. So in many ways, I would say that after the Hamas attack, Israel has transformed into an entire new country, Thanos.
Well, Endy, you're
even though I will say I'll agree with last year, but there are the seeds of difficulty have been planted. Just by definition of what we had last week, who the losers were, they were losers because Israel beat them. Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, Assad, Israel played decisive roles in all of them being losers. But as in every overreach story in history, remember before the attacks, you had divisive political moves in Israel, like the judicial reform. They just put that back on the table. There was also the debate about whether certain people and certain communities exempt from military service in Israel would have to serve.
Yes, but you're talking about right now, Eddie.
Yeah, but in 24, I'm saying you're right in 24, but some of the seeds for difficulties ahead, and if there is peace, if there is now that a lot of its adversaries have been defeated, and maybe if a nail can be put in the coffin of the axis of resistance, and if you have to revive a greater peace process and have a new order, does this coalition that Bibi Netanyahu put together, can it survive? I don't know. I don't know that the judicial reform, if there is no war, I don't know that their moves on judicial reform. He's expelled Gallant from Likud. I don't know how well the Likud coalition will go on. He had some problems with American Jews before October 7th. I don't know if those come back. Right now, until the axis of resistance is totally defeated, we'll see what comes next. But Israel should be careful of overreach.
Mm-hmm.
What about here when we're sticking with Israel on, in the arena of public opinion, because we have seen public opinion criticism of Israel over the last year and a half. It seems that there have been, from the U.S. too, where we see different protests. There were campus protests. There's a number of
they didn't do anything.
Op-eds and things that we've been reading about. But I don't know how you see that factoring in, or if that isn't a factor that we should be worried about.
It's what Lena said. They went ahead. Who's going to? And frankly, especially with this administration coming in and the Congress that's coming in, you have 4 years of pro-Israel ahead of you. if some of the anti-Israel activists thought they taught Kamala a lesson by costing her Michigan or another state, maybe the opposite lesson is going to be and frankly, a lot of it has been translated into anti-Semitism. The fact that Israel is completely targeted and solely targeted, when nobody has said stuff about Azerbaijan doing what they've done in Artsakh. Nobody is talking, where are these campus precedents when Turkey is getting ready to, and gleefully talking about wiping out Kurds. Sudan is back on the table. We could go on. So, yes,
well, let's look over
the debate,
a few miles
the debate
from
will
Israel.
continue. The debate will continue, but I think a lot of these campus protests have been exposed for what they are.
Let me interrupt you, and let's shift a little bit over to another country in the East Med, Cyprus, that seems to really be one of the big winners and was your third pick. So we'll wrap up with our sports segment after that. But you and Lena have been covering and been working on this issue. Endy, give us the overview. Just how important was 2024 for Cyprus?
Huge. I mean, it starts actually with October 7th. It starts with the blow up in the Eastern Mediterranean across the water. But Cyprus has become a hub for dealing with great, as the President Nikos Christodoulidis, I will say he specifically as a winner, because this is part of a vision that Lena described in a recent article where he's been talking about Cyprus as a solution for a year rather than just as a problem. And he has provided solutions. But look at specifically the U.S.-Cyprus relationship over the last year. Cyprus got mentioned in the State of the Union because of the humanitarian corridor. Cyprus saw that there was a problem with humanitarian aid going into Gaza. Maybe this was not the optimal solution. There are people who said a land route was better, but a land route wasn't there. So, Cyprus came in with a solution. The U.S. Navy, a few years back, remember there was a concern about whether the Russian Navy was making port stops in Cyprus. Well, the Russian Navy no longer makes port stops in Cyprus, but there's been more than a dozen visits by the Sixth Fleet. Cyprus had constant high-level congressional delegations. Cyprus had its first strategic dialogue with the United States. A week later, had the first Oval Office visit by a Cypriot president in more than 30 years, right? Yeah, in about 30 years. And then the exclamation point, in a brilliant move, as Syria is falling apart and people are worried about religious minorities, because we saw this play out during the rise of ISIS. President Christodoulidis appointed a special representative, a high-level diplomat, the political director of the Cypriot foreign ministry, and someone who knows the Middle East very well, Thessalia Chambos, to be the special representative for religious minorities and religious freedom in the Middle East. An extraordinary and unprecedented diplomatic year for Cyprus.
Yeah, that move, the last one especially that you described, Endy, and we covered it on our podcast, The Greek Current, that's something that's been very well received in Washington. Lena, how have you been viewing this unfold from DC?
So I would definitely agree that this has been a good year for Cyprus, and it feels like the best is yet to come for a couple of reasons. The country is clearly gaining momentum and turning recognition on the international stage, not just as a strategic player because of its strategic location, but as a problem solver, as Eddie said, and a nation that can be trusted to navigate complex issues in a region and in a time dominated by difficult and complicated issues. So yes, I'd say Cyprus is absolutely one of the winners this year. Its growing influence suggests that this role is only going to get bigger, hopefully.
All right. Well, I mean, let's pivot to sports now. Dimitri, back to you. Your third pick, women's U.S. basketball. Give us your thoughts here. What have you seen in 2024? What really stood out to you?
Well, all four of us have referenced the word or shared examples about momentum. Lena just said the momentum that Cyprus has, and momentum is a funny thing. It's a really powerful thing. First, you start to feel it, and then you see it. And I think that's what happened with women's basketball in 2024. It didn't start in January of 2024 and get to this pinnacle. This is something that, women basketball players and coaches have been setting the foundation for 2 or 3 decades. I mean, you think back to great players like Cheryl Miller and Lisa Leslie and Candace Parker and Sue Bird. You think about these great coaches like Pat Summitt and Dino Oriema, and now they're passing the baton. But it's been an amazing story for a couple different reasons. First, sports unites people. Sports brings people together. These young women are role models to other younger women like my daughters and young men as well. You see the impact that it's having in this country, starting with the NCAA. The women's national championship was more viewed than the men's national championship.
Because it was better basketball.
Well, I'll get to that in just a second. Then you had the coverage of the WNBA draft to have like a 500% increase year over year. In the WNBA, you had viewership of young women between the age of 3 and 17 go up by like 600%. You had a sold out stadium in New York for the finals between the Liberty and the Aces. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And these young women, these athletes are stronger, they're faster, they're smarter. Endy, you just referenced this right now. I think back to the men's game. The men's game in the 80s and the 90s started to be played above the rim. And then there was this balance of tough defense, above the rim, outside shooting. Now the game is played 30 feet from the rim. And in my opinion, it's poor basketball. The women's game is actually better basketball. I mean, look at the gold medal game in the Olympics between the United States and France. France went toe to toe with the United States. It was an amazing game. So to me, I think in the world that we're in right now, that's highly polarized, that's very divided, team sports brings people together. Team sports provides mentorship. Team sports creates leadership. It shows unity. You're starting to see this with women's sports in England and other parts of the world. So I think 2024 will build momentum. This is a lasting legacy. This isn't a one and done. Yeah. You're going to see this spread over the next couple decades around the world, just like the men's game did with the Dream Team in 1992.
Well, Endy's Greek sports feeling that momentum as well this year?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to agree with Dimitri and talk about the NBA game in the 80s. There is, watch women's sports. I mean, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, again, showing my Chicago bias. Man, that could develop into the Magic versus Bird and take women's basketball to another level. Look, Greek sports, it was a great year for Greek sports. You had the Euro basketball win by Panathinaikos. You had Greece returning to the Olympics on the strength of Giannis Antetokounmpo. You have Antetokounmpo finishing the year as the NBA's leading scorer, leading the Bucks to a Euro Cup. But even in that greater context, I have to say, again, showing my bias, but Olympiacos and its owner, Vangelis Marinakis, are the big winners. Olympiacos brought the first European championship in soccer or football to Greece in an amazing, thrilling game. I was lucky to be there in Hagia Sophia. It also brought the under-19 championship. So that tells you a lot about the future. But, going back to the owner, he's also finishing the year now. Olympiacos is going into the last weekend of the year, number one in the Greek Super League. His other team in England, Nottingham, is third in the Premier League. That's just amazing. He has a team in Portugal. There's all kinds of talk. Sky TV in England did a documentary. He's planning something global, and it's actually fitting because he's also in maritime. That the biggest industry in Greece is really a global power. Now, if Greek sports can take that global stage, in his maritime industry, he was honored by, he got an honorary doctorate from the Merchant Marine Academy in Massachusetts. Maestro in Blue, which his TV station developed, is coming back for a third season, and that was really because Henri Barkey, I hope he's watching, he asked for it, and you know, to honor or to commemorate the 50th dark anniversary of Cyprus's invasion by Turkey, Mega produced the Famagusta miniseries. So that's a really solid year for Mr. Marinakis.
You know, as we close out our show, I want to kind of look at an issue that we haven't really touched on. We kicked off this series with a turkey roast, but this year looks like it's been closing out with Turkey kind of chalking up a few wins on the scoreboard ahead of the new year. Is Turkey a winner that we should be discussing as well? And I'd like all of your thoughts on that. You know, Lena, if you want to jump in, or Endy.
I also have my third pick, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, you know, you mentioned India, and India is this country that's, you know, everyone's got their eye on. It could even be a country that we look at, you know, in the coming decades.
Yes, and I mean, despite widespread dissatisfaction with the incumbents, as we talked about it quite extensively in our previous episode, India's leader Modi and his party managed to secure election. And I mean, of course, it was with a weaker mandate than before, but it doesn't really matter. They managed to hold into power in a global political system that it's changing faster than we can keep up with. So Modi, who's been, I mean, either way, a key player in the global stage, now he's right at the center of global developments, and with the US-China competition set to dominate the international agenda, Modi's role is only going to grow. And also, if Trump, and that's an important point, follows through on his promises to end the war in the Middle East, then the IMED, something that Endy recently wrote in Kathimerini, and he could also offer some points here, could very well become the cornerstone of a new regional order.
I completely agree with Lena. I think India is such a massive. You know, there was a few years back, Admiral Stavridis wrote a piece of historical fiction, 2034, about a World War III. It was between the U.S. and China, and the winner at the end of that novel, the one who decided how to make the peace and basically came out ruling the world, was India. I don't think it's as far-fetched as people think. As Lena said, Modi defied the trend of incumbents falling. His vision of India as a Hindu state is definitely taking hold. You see, despite his kind of tensions with Muslims in his region, in his own country, when he goes to the Middle East, he's always welcome with open arms. He's been a key for successive administrations. And this is going back to Bush, by the way, but Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, and now Trump again have been growing ever closer with India. They see India, as we saw during the Biden administration, as the key. They created the Quad. It's going to be the key state in the competition with China. And more importantly, because now with all the debates in immigration, we know this in Europe, we know this in the United States, we know this all over the world. India, the majority of its population is young. Mm-hmm. There's growth rate, and Dimitri can tell you what effect India is having on the global economy, and it's going to have major, and especially here in the United States. I don't think their diaspora is as organized as other European diasporas or American Jews. India could be a Western, or at least a Western liberal state the way it stands right now, major and growing economic power with strong presence in all Western capitals because of a dynamic diaspora.
Absolutely. I agree with Lena and Endy. India, again, this is something that has been in the making now for quite some time. And the reference made to Modi, yes, he he won with a little bit of a smaller mandate, but there's been stability in India under Modi now for a long time. If the United States, the new administration, succeeds in any way with its foreign policy against China in particular, you will see countries like Vietnam and India benefit from that success the U.S. has against China. They have a very large population. They have a young population. They do have a strong diaspora. Many C-suite leaders of great global companies in the United States are of Indian descent. They're making a big impact. So I strongly agree. I don't want to use, I don't know if the right description is quietly, but when you look in that region, there's so much emphasis being put on places like China and Japan, and India is always sometimes forgotten. And they have very, very methodically built themselves into a powerhouse. Absolutely.
And back to Lena's reference to the IMEC corridor, watch it. When IMEC comes back, if the Middle East stabilizes and India starts looking west, which IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, was announced right before the October 7 terrorist attacks. If IMEC comes back, that will be like a huge balance to the Belt and Road Initiative, and it will be a big win for Greece too. Kyriakos Mitsotakis has put a lot into this relationship with Modi. We've seen the historic visits of the Greek Prime Minister to India and Modi to Greece. And let's remember where the IMEC comes. It comes ashore in Europe. It's in Thessaloniki, which northern Greece has been also on a win streak. Going to your question, that's probably for another episode, right? Turkey is on a little win streak, but they suffered a lot of losses. But if northern Greece continues its win streak, Turkey's going to be unhappy.
And also, as Endy said in a discussion that I think that we had yesterday, Endy, and correct me if I'm wrong, we should not focus on the developments right now when it comes to Turkey, but rather on how they will fit into the future. So let's not rush to conclusions right now, right?
And India and Turkey don't get along, so.
Another relationship to watch out for. Everyone, thanks for joining. Endy, Lena, Dimitri, it's been great chatting. Hope everyone has a happy new year, and we'll be back with you in 2025.
Thank you, guys.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.